This is the first of several videos where we're going to take a look at the War of 1812, and realistically, this is the main issue that 4th President James Madison dealt with as President of the United States, so much to the point where the opposition Federalists mockingly referred to this as Mr. Madison's War. They weren't necessarily fond of it. Now, you want to break it down. There's 4 main reasons why this war took place. British interception of U.S. trade ships with France. This is more of the economic side of things, and we're going to look at this economic issue momentarily. The second would be impressment. Still coming back again. We've addressed impressment multiple times. It happened in the 1700s. It's continuing to occur, and truthfully, it's amplifying because of the Napoleonic Wars. Britain needs men to man their ships, so they're going with the policy of impressment. This issue also has previously come up, where members of Frontier America are claiming that Britain is not only inciting Native Americans to revolt, but they're actively arming them as well. And then finally, we have a new issue that is kind of popping up in American history. The emergence of war hawks. Congressmen who, for one reason or another, are demanding that the honor of the United States requires war. So, a little more in depth, of those 4 issues, we're going to look at 2 of them, as well as the final event that really set war off. First is economic concerns, and there's a 1 next to it, because remember, this deals with cause number 1. Now, President Jefferson signed the Non-Intercourse Act into law 3 days before the end of his 2nd term. This replaced the Embargo Act of 1807, where we weren't trading with anyone. So even though Jefferson signs it, his hand-picked successor, Madison, is the one that has to deal with the fallout of it. The idea was that we're reaching out to Britain and France. So either country means Great Britain and France. They both had the opportunity to stop engaging in what we consider to be hostile actions. The president would then have the authority to reopen trade with whomever stopped these hostile actions. Now, the British made the first move by offering to repeal what were called the Orders in Council laws. So this is where England backs down. The Orders in Council laws had tried to block any and all trade with France because England and France are at war. These are the Napoleonic Wars. We agreed. However, England passed another version of these laws in 1810. Partially because the British minister who had proposed repealing them actually was not given the authority to do so. So the Non-Intercourse Act isn't necessarily working out. Now, the next law to try and replace that is known as Macon's Bill number 2, and to a degree, it mirrors the Non-Intercourse Act. It doesn't duplicate it, it mirrors it. All trade restrictions are lifted. So with the Non-Intercourse Act, we're not trading with Britain or France, but with Macon's Bill number 2, we reopen with both of them. The president does have the power to reimpose them with France if Britain repeals the Orders in Council. Or he could stop trading with Britain if Napoleon agreed to stop preventing U.S. ships from trying to trade with England. Now, 2 months later, Napoleon is the one who agrees. Napoleon rescinds or backs off on the edicts that allowed American ships to be stopped. So then Britain had 3 months to repeal their Orders in Council. They had 3 months to repeal the laws that stopped any and all ships that tried to trade with France. They didn't do that. So we start trading with France. This is one of the key laws that led to war. The Orders in Council, where Britain stopped our ships. That's one of the main things that led to war. Britain repealed them. They repealed them days before we officially declared war, but information took too long to travel. So the plans are already in motion to back down. So technically, the economic issue had been resolved, but by that point, we had already gone too far down the line. So that's the economic issue. The fourth issue deals with war hawks. And you normally tend to find, especially when you look at American history, that wars are generational. Each generation has their conflict, and often the next generation engages in another because they don't remember the previous conflict. So what we are seeing here is that kind of first generation of congressmen who don't necessarily remember the revolution. They don't really remember what war was like. The two leaders of the war hawks are Henry Clay of Kentucky, and he actually was elected Speaker when he was elected to the House. So we have Henry Clay of Kentucky, and then we have John C. Calhoun of South Carolina. And this is representative of the fact that the West and the South often made up the war hawks. Now, Henry Clay had briefly served in the Senate, but he was elected to the House, immediately became Speaker. Calhoun was another newcomer to the House, and he had actually lost family members in wars with natives on the frontier. Henry Clay summed it up best. I prefer the troubled ocean of war demanded by honor and independence of the country. The main idea here is that war is the only option. Peaceful measures have failed. Economic pressure is not working. So these men, typically from the South and the West, have this new frontier attitude that they're bringing to Congress. The embargo had hurt them the most. They're the ones that are clashing with Native Americans. Overall, they're looking at the British ship seizures, impressment, and the attack on the Chesapeake as insults that need to be directly dealt with. Now, there was a committee on foreign relations that met to address all of these issues. And here's where we start to see the desire for lands. This committee even stated the advantages of acquiring parts of Canada. They said that they felt the president would cooperate with their requests and would declare war if our complaints are not redressed by next May. So by next May, they meant May of 1812. So we have a new class of politicians that are going to look to solidify the U.S. position using strength, using power. So we've looked at the economic side of things in detail. Now this is the political side. And we arrive at kind of the final event, the so-called straw that broke the camel's back, the Battle of Tippecanoe. Understanding Tippecanoe begins with understanding Tecumseh. Now, Tecumseh is a Shawnee warrior. He's of the Shawnee tribe. And he felt that all natives needed to unite to resist the advance of white settlers. This is an idea that was first proposed back in the 1640s on the East Coast, but it never came to fruition. It never came true. However, Tecumseh began building an alliance, a confederation of tribes east of the Mississippi River. Now, Tecumseh's brother was known as the Prophet, and he believed that Native Americans needed to return to their ancestral ways and reject white customs, mainly alcohol. So you have Tecumseh. He's the political and military leader. He's a strategist. It was even said that if Tecumseh weren't born within the borders of the United States, he would have been the leader of a great empire himself. Partnering with him is his brother, the spiritual leader. The two of them combined to make a very effective team. Now, the two of them set up a village at Great Clearing in what's now Indiana. This was the Indiana Territory. It's on the Tippecanoe River. The battle itself actually occurred prior to the meeting of the Committee on Foreign Relations. That's the committee that said, hey, maybe we should get Canada, go to war if our demands aren't met. So the head of this committee, who personally knew some of the Americans who died, included Tippecanoe in his report. Now, the leader of the American forces, you can see him up here. It's a man named William Henry Harrison. He's governor of the Indiana Territory, and he led a force to Great Clearing. The natives attacked and killed 200 of his men. But Harrison's forces declared victory when they burned the town. Now, it says Tecumseh's forces. It doesn't actually say Tecumseh, because Tecumseh was in the South. He was actually trying to gather support in the South during this battle and wasn't present. And he was absolutely furious that his brother had engaged the Americans. Now, Tecumseh is still alive. You can see here. He's alive, so he's still a threat. He took his forces and fled to the relative safety of British Canada. Now, the committee believed that the British supported Tecumseh's forces not only by egging them on, but by arming them. And British-made rifles were left behind in the wake of battle. This really intensified the arguments to go to war. Now, Madison was willing to go to war, but he had wanted to hold off until we had enough troops to sufficiently wage war. Tippecanoe was November of 1811. The report, which mentioned us maybe wanting to take Canada, was after that. And by June of 1812, the U.S. voted to declare war. Congress voted to go to war. It was authorized by the president. And 4 days after that declaration, Britain rescinded the orders in council. But you know, it was too little, too late. We were already going down the path of war. It couldn't be stopped at this point. So for the second time in the history of our young nation, we are again at war with Great Britain.